Tonight you are watching a small medieval family as the last warmth of the day settles into their wooden home. The light outside fading slowly, not suddenly, just enough for shadows to stretch along the walls. And you notice how quiet everything feels, how calm it seems before anything begins. And in front of you, on a rough wooden table, sits a simple meal. Bread that is not fresh, but still soft enough. A pot of thin stew giving off a gentle warmth. Nothing abundant, nothing luxurious, but enough. And that word, enough, still exists here. For now, the father sits first, not speaking, just resting his hands on the table as if measuring the day in silence. The mother follows, placing the bowls carefully, always carefully, as though balance matters more than quantity. And the child watches, eyes calm, not yet searching, not yet counting, just waiting. They begin to eat together, slow bites, no rush, no fear. The kind of eating that belongs to people who believe there will always be another meal. The fire crackles softly. The wooden walls hold the warmth inside, and nothing in this moment feels like it will break. Nothing feels like it will change. And yet, somewhere just outside this quiet room, something already has. You remain there as the evening settles deeper, the bowls now empty, turned slightly to the side, and the warmth of the meal fades into the quiet air. The father rises without a word, not suddenly, just slowly enough that the movement feels natural. And he walks to the corner where a small sack of grain rests against the wall. He kneels, careful, practiced, as if this is something he has done many times before. And with steady hands, he loosens the tie and opens the sack just enough to look inside. He does not reach in, not yet. He only looks, measuring with his eyes, estimating without counting, the kind of knowing that comes from repetition, from responsibility. Behind him, the mother watches for a moment, not asking anything, not interrupting, just noticing. And then she turns away, returning to the table, wiping the wooden surface slowly, as if nothing about this matters, as if this is just another evening. But her movements are quieter now, more careful. And the child, sitting still, glances once toward the sack, then back down, not fully understanding, but beginning, just slightly, to notice that some things are being checked more than before. The night continues to settle, not with silence, but with small, familiar sounds. The soft scrape of wood, the low breath of the fire, the quiet rhythm of a home preparing to rest. And the mother begins to portion what remains. Not much, just a small piece of bread left on the table. And she pauses for a moment before touching it, as if deciding something that does not need to be spoken. Then, gently, she breaks it into 3 pieces, each one shaped by hand, not equal by size, but adjusted, carefully adjusted, until they appear to be enough. She places them where they belong, one for each. No hesitation, no discussion, just the quiet act of dividing. The father returns and sits again, his eyes briefly passing over the pieces, not counting, not questioning, just seeing. And the child reaches for theirs without waiting, small fingers quick, but not desperate. Not yet. They eat slowly, again, as they always have. But something is different, not in what they do, but in how closely each movement is noticed, how each bite seems to carry a little more meaning than before. And even as the fire softens and the room grows dim, the idea of enough begins very quietly to change. The evening lingers a little longer than usual, as if no one is ready to let it end too quickly, and you notice how the child lifts their head, crumbs still resting at the edge of their lips, asking in a soft, simple voice when there will be bread like before again. The kind that is warm, thick, easy to tear without care. And the question hangs there, not heavy, not yet, just gentle, almost innocent. The father does not answer immediately. His hands remain still on the table, fingers resting against the wood. And the mother glances down, brushing away crumbs that do not need to be brushed, buying a moment, just a moment, before anything must be said. And when the father finally speaks, his voice is steady, quiet. He says, "Soon." Not as a promise, not as a lie, just as something that sounds close enough to comfort. And the child nods, satisfied, because at this stage, words are still enough. And you can feel it, that fragile space where belief still fills what is missing, where nothing has broken yet, only stretched, just slightly, just enough to be noticed, if you are paying attention. The next day does not arrive with anything dramatic, no sudden change, no visible sign, just the same pale light slipping into the room. But outside, voices pass more often than usual. Distant at first, then closer. Low conversations carried by the wind. And though you cannot hear every word, you catch pieces, small fragments, about fields that did not grow as expected, about grain that failed to fill, about others who are already saving what they have. And inside the house, the mother pauses near the doorway, listening without stepping outside, her hand resting against the frame, still, while the father remains seated, not reacting, not yet, as if waiting to decide whether these words matter. And the child does not notice any of this. They move about slowly, tracing lines in the dust on the floor, living in a moment that has not changed for them. But you can feel it now, the first shift, not in what the family has, but in what they have heard. And sometimes, that is where it begins. Not with hunger itself, but with the quiet understanding that it might come. By the time the next meal is prepared, nothing appears different at first. The same table, the same bowls, the same careful hands placing them down. But if you look closely, if you slow your attention just enough, you notice that the portions are slightly smaller. Not enough to question, not enough to cause concern, just a little less, as if something invisible has been taken away. And when they begin to eat, no one comments, no one hesitates, because this change is small enough to pass without words. The father eats at the same pace, the mother keeps her eyes on her bowl, and the child finishes quickly, then sits still, not asking for more, not because they are full, but because they have not yet learned to ask twice. And the silence feels different now, not uncomfortable, not tense, just thinner, as though something has been removed from it. And this is how it starts, not with absence, but with reduction, quiet, careful, almost kind, a decision made without announcement, to take a little less today, so there might be something left for tomorrow. The routine continues, and from the outside, it still looks the same. The family gathers, the bowls are placed, the fire gives its steady warmth. But the act of eating begins to stretch, each bite taken a little slower, not out of habit, but out of awareness, as if time itself can make the food last longer. The father chews with quiet focus, the mother lowers her gaze, and the child watches, not the food, but the others, learning without being told. And when the bread is broken, the pieces are smaller now, shaped with more care, edges pressed gently to keep them from crumbling, and no one reaches too quickly. No one takes more than what is placed before them, because something unspoken has settled between them, a shared understanding that what they have must be held on to, not just eaten.
And even though they still sit together, still share the same table, you can feel the shift, subtle but real, where eating is no longer just a moment of comfort, but something measured, something watched, something that cannot be taken for granted anymore.
That night, as the fire burns lower and the room softens into shadow, the father speaks again. Not loudly, not with urgency, just enough for the others to hear. He says it will pass, that seasons change, that there have been years like this before, and his voice carries a calm that feels practiced, something he has learned to use when answers are not certain. The mother listens without interrupting, her hands resting in her lap, still, while the child leans slightly closer, drawn to the sound of reassurance more than the meaning of it. And for a moment, it works. The room feels steadier, the silence less fragile, because belief, even when thin, can still hold people together. And yet, beneath his words, there is something else. Not doubt exactly, but weight. The kind that does not disappear just because it is not spoken. And you notice how quickly the conversation ends, how the quiet returns, not broken, just reshaped, as if comfort has been placed carefully over something that remains unresolved.
Later, when the others begin to settle, the mother remains near the table a little longer, gathering what little is left. Not much, just crumbs. A small piece that could be saved. And she wraps it gently, more gently than necessary, as if the act itself matters, as if care can somehow preserve more than the food. And she places it aside, not in plain sight, not hidden completely, just somewhere in between, a space that suggests it is meant to be used, but not yet. And when she finally moves away, she pauses for a moment, looking at the table, at the empty bowls, at the place where the bread had been. And there is no fear in her expression. Not yet. Only a quiet awareness, a counting that happens without numbers, a recognition that something is changing, slowly, steadily. And even though nothing has been said, nothing has been decided, you can feel it now. The beginning of watchfulness. The moment when people start to pay closer attention to what remains. The next evening arrives, much like the last. The same fading light, the same gathering around the table. But something is different in a way that is difficult to name. The movements are still careful, the portions still small, the silence still present. Yet there is a new layer beneath it, a quiet noticing that was not there before. The father looks once more toward the corner where the grain is kept. The mother places the bowls with the same precision, and the child sits waiting. But this time, their eyes linger a little longer on the food before them, not with worry, not fully, but with a kind of attention that did not exist before. And as they begin to eat, the rhythm is slower, more deliberate, as if each moment is being held onto, not just experienced. And though they still share the table, still move together in the same small space, you can feel the shift settling in. Gentle, almost invisible, but real. The quiet understanding that what they have is no longer simply enough, but something that must be watched, measured, and perhaps, one day, questioned. Morning arrives slowly, a pale light slipping into the room, and you watch as the father moves again toward the corner, toward the small sack that now holds more meaning than before. He kneels, just as he has done in other mornings. But this time, his hands do not pause at the opening. He loosens the tie and opens it wider, just enough to see clearly. And he leans in slightly, looking, not quickly, not casually, but with quiet attention, as if the answer is already there, waiting to be accepted. And for a moment,
He stays still, longer than usual. Then his hand reaches inside, moving gently through the grain, feeling what remains rather than counting it. And when he pulls his hand back, he closes the sack carefully, almost the same as before. Almost, but not quite. Because something in the movement has changed. Something slower, heavier. And behind him, the mother watches without speaking, without asking, because she already understands. Not exactly how much is left, but enough to know that it is less than it should be.
When the meal is prepared, the pot rests above the fire, as always. The same place, the same quiet warmth rising from it. But as the mother stirs, you notice how the motion continues a little longer. The spoon moving in slow circles through a broth that seems thinner than before, stretched carefully, not to change the taste, but to make it last. And when she begins to serve, the bowls look full at first glance, but only because the liquid has been extended, not increased. And she places them down gently, one by one. Steady hands, steady breath. And no one speaks. Not the father, not the child. Because this change is small enough to pass without words. And as they eat, the warmth is still there, familiar. But it fades more quickly now, leaving behind a quiet space that settles in the body. Something not quite hunger, but no longer comfort.
Later that day, the father steps outside earlier than usual, the door closing softly behind him. And you follow the sense of his movement as he walks farther than before, past the places that once offered enough, toward ground that feels less certain, less familiar. And he searches without hurry, but without stopping, scanning the edges of fields, the base of trees, any place where something might remain, something overlooked. And after some time, he bends to pick up something small, something that could still be used. Not much, but not nothing. And when he returns home, he carries it with quiet care, as if even this small addition matters now. And inside, the mother receives it without surprise, only a soft acknowledgement, as though this too has become part of their days, the slow, steady reaching for anything that might help them hold on a little longer. That evening, the table feels quieter than before. Not empty, not tense, just quieter, as though something has been set aside to make room for stillness. And when they sit together, the sounds become more noticeable. The soft touch of wood, the faint movement of spoons, each small action carrying a little more weight than it once did. And no one speaks. Not because they cannot, but because there is nothing that needs to be said. The father keeps his gaze low. The mother moves with the same care as always. And the child, who once filled this space with simple questions, now remains silent, watching, listening, learning in a way that does not require words. And the quiet stretches gently around them, not uncomfortable, but different, as if the meal is no longer only a moment to share, but something to move through carefully, without drawing attention to what has changed. As they continue eating, the child finishes first, just as before. But this time, instead of looking away, their eyes remain on the table, moving slowly, not searching, not asking, just noticing. And for a brief moment, their gaze rests on the bowls that are not theirs, then lifts again, as if unsure of what that feeling means. And the parents sense it, not directly, not openly, but in the way their own movements become slightly more measured, slightly more contained, as though each of them has felt that small shift, that quiet moment, when eating is no longer only about what is in front of you, but also about what remains around you. And though nothing is said, something has been learned, something that will stay. Later, when the room grows dim and the fire softens into a low glow, the mother remains near the storage place a little longer than usual. And after a quiet pause, she reaches forward, opening the container just enough to see inside. And her hands move gently, slowly, not taking, not removing, only touching, measuring through familiarity rather than counting. And each motion is careful, as if rushing might change what is there. And when she finishes, she closes it again, just as gently, her expression calm, unchanged. But the moment lingers, longer than it once did, before she rises. Because what she has seen, what she has felt, does not need to be spoken to be understood. It settles quietly, becoming part of something that is already beginning to shape their days.
The next meal does not come at its usual time. The hours stretch a little longer before the fire is lit, and no one comments on the delay, not the father, not the mother, not even the child, because the change is quiet enough to be accepted without question. And when the food is finally prepared, the portions are slightly smaller again, not enough to draw attention, only enough to be felt in the space between bites. And they sit together as always, but the rhythm has shifted, slower, more deliberate, each movement held just a little longer than before, as if time itself is being used carefully now, stretched in the same way as the food. And though nothing has been decided aloud, a pattern has begun to form, where waiting becomes part of eating, and delay becomes a way to hold on.
As they eat, the mother slows her pace, taking smaller bites, leaving gentle pauses between them. And when her bowl is nearly empty, she sets her spoon down, even though a small amount still remains. And she leans back slightly, exhaling as if satisfied, as if finished, though you can see that she is not. And the father notices, his eyes resting on her bowl for a brief moment, not questioning, not interrupting, just seeing. And he continues eating without change, neither accepting nor refusing what he understands. And the child watches quietly, not fully aware of what has happened, only that something has been left behind, something that could have been taken. And the room holds that moment softly, without words, but not without meaning. The father finishes his meal in the same quiet way, setting his bowl down with care, and for a moment his gaze lingers, not on his own place, but on what remains around him. Small traces, small absences, things that are no longer where they used to be. And though he says nothing, something in his stillness suggests that he has begun to notice more than before. And the silence that follows is not empty, but full of small understandings, each person holding their own version of what is happening. The mother with her quiet restraint, the father with his silent awareness, and the child with a growing sense that meals are changing, not in ways that can be explained, but in ways that can be felt, gently, steadily, and without pause. That night, the house settles into darkness more slowly, as if the quiet itself has grown heavier. And when they lie down to rest, the room holds a different kind of stillness. Not the calm that comes from comfort, but something thinner, something that does not fully settle. And the child shifts once, then again, not speaking, not calling out, just adjusting, as though trying to find a position where the body feels complete. And after a while, the movement stops, replaced by a quiet that is not quite sleep. And nearby, the mother remains still, eyes open a little longer than before, listening to the soft sounds of the room, aware in a way she has not been before, while the father lies facing the wall, unmoving, as if rest has become something to wait for, rather than something that comes easily. And for the first time, the night passes with something missing, not loudly, not sharply, just enough to be felt, a gentle absence where fullness used to be. The next day moves quietly, the same routines, the same small tasks, but something begins to shift beneath them. And when the father returns from outside, he pauses before entering, his hand resting briefly on the door, as if deciding something that does not need to be spoken. And once inside, he moves toward the storage without calling attention to it, his steps careful, measured, and he opens it slightly, just enough, his hand slipping inside for a moment before withdrawing. And when he turns away, nothing in his expression has changed, nothing that can be seen, and yet the movement carries a weight, something small, something taken, or perhaps something set aside. And the mother, though she does not turn, though she continues her work as before, seems to sense it. Not fully, not clearly, but enough for a quiet awareness to settle. A feeling that something has happened without being shared.
Later, when the room grows still again, the mother returns to the same place, to the container that now draws her attention more often than before, and she opens it slowly, carefully, her hands moving with the same quiet precision. But this time, her touch lingers longer, her fingers moving through what remains, not only measuring, but searching, as if trying to understand something that does not fully reveal itself. And there is a pause, a longer one, before she closes it again. And though her face remains calm, unchanged, something in her stillness suggests a question has formed. Not spoken, not yet, but present. A quiet uncertainty that settles beside her thoughts. Because what is left no longer feels exactly the same as it did before. And even without knowing why, she begins to hold that feeling, gently, carefully, as though it might matter soon. That afternoon, when the house is quiet and the light rests softly along the floor, the mother moves a small bundle aside, lifting a thin layer of straw near the corner, not with urgency, not with suspicion, just with the quiet habit of checking. And beneath it, her hand pauses, because there is something there that was not there before. A small shape, rough, familiar, a single piece of food set aside, hidden just enough to be missed at first glance. And she does not pick it up immediately. She only looks, her fingers hovering for a moment before gently covering it again, returning the straw as it was, her movements careful, unchanged, as if nothing has been found. And when she stands, she does not turn, does not call out, because whatever this is, it is not ready to be spoken yet. It remains there, quiet, waiting, just like the thought that now settles beside her. The child moves through the room later, slowly, without direction, tracing the edges of things, touching what is familiar, and when no one is watching, their hand slips toward a small piece of bread left near the table. Not much, just enough to fit into their palm, and they pause, holding it there, not eating it right away, just feeling its weight, its presence, as if deciding something that has no clear name. And then, carefully, they move away, tucking it out of sight, not out of fear, not fully, but with a quiet instinct that has begun to form. And when they return to the open space of the room, their expression is the same, calm, unchanged, as though nothing has happened. And yet something has, something small, something that will not easily disappear. That evening, when the family gathers again, the table looks as it always has. The same bowls, the same careful placement, but when the food is set down, the portions are not quite even, not enough to be obvious, only enough to be felt. And no one speaks of it, not the father, not the mother, not the child, because each of them has already begun to carry something unspoken, something kept aside. And as they eat, their eyes do not meet as often. Their movements stay closer to themselves, contained, measured. And though they still sit together, still share the same space, something has shifted quietly between them.
a thin layer of distance that was not there before. And it does not break the moment. It does not interrupt the meal. It simply settles in, becoming part of it, as natural as the silence that now stays a little longer than it used to.
They gather again at the table, the same places, the same careful routine. But as the food is set down, something in the air feels more distant, not colder, just less connected. And when they begin to eat, their eyes remain lowered, each person focused on what is in front of them. And when a glance does rise, it passes quickly, not lingering, not meeting another, as if looking too long might reveal something that is better left unseen. And the silence stretches gently between them, no longer shared in the same way, but divided, each person holding their own quiet space. And even though nothing is said, nothing is confronted, you can feel it clearly now, the way closeness has begun to loosen, not suddenly, not completely, just enough to change how they sit together, how they exist in the same room without fully meeting each other anymore.
Later, when the night settles and the house grows still, the mother moves quietly from her place, her steps soft against the floor, and she returns once more to the storage, opening it just enough to see inside. And this time, her hands move more slowly, more carefully, not only measuring, but comparing, remembering what it felt like before and how it feels now. And though nothing is counted aloud, something does not align. Something feels lighter than it should. And she pauses, her hand resting against the edge, her thoughts still, as if waiting for certainty. But none comes. Only a quiet sense that something is no longer as it was. And when she closes it again, her movements remain calm, controlled, yet the moment lingers longer than before, held in silence, held alone. The next morning, the father prepares to leave again, his movements steady, unchanged on the surface. But before he steps outside, he pauses near the storage, his hand resting briefly against it, not opening it this time, not checking, only touching, as if acknowledging its presence, its importance. And then he turns away, continuing as usual, and the mother watches from a distance, her expression still, her attention quiet. And though neither of them speaks, neither of them questions, something has begun to form between them. Not a conflict, not yet, but a space filled with awareness, where each small action is noticed, remembered, and held. And even as the day continues, as the house returns to its routines, that space remains, subtle, invisible, but growing, slowly shaping the way they move around each other without ever naming it. Deep into the night, when the fire has faded to a soft glow and the house rests in near stillness, the child wakes quietly, not from sound, but from something inside. A gentle pull that does not let them remain asleep. And they lie there for a moment, eyes open in the dark, listening to the slow breathing around them, before shifting carefully, rising just enough to sit, their movements small, practiced without knowing why. And after a pause, they stand, stepping lightly across the floor, drawn toward the table, toward where something might still remain. And their hand reaches out, searching, not finding much, only traces, only absence. And they stay there for a moment longer than needed, as if hoping something might appear if they wait. But nothing does. And eventually, they return to their place, lying down again, still, quiet, but not fully at rest, because this time, the night has not held them completely. Something has interrupted it. Something that will return. Morning comes gently, as it always does. The same light, the same quiet beginning. But as the mother moves through her routine, her attention shifts toward the small things, the places where items rest, where they should remain unchanged. And when she pauses near the table, her hand hovers slightly, noticing something that is no longer there. Not much, not enough to name clearly, but enough to be felt. A small absence, a piece that should have remained until now. And she does not speak, does not call it out. Her expression stays calm, unchanged, but her movements slow for a moment, just long enough for the realization to settle. And when she continues, everything appears the same again, the same actions, the same rhythm. Yet beneath it, something has shifted. Something has been taken without being seen.
That evening, when they sit together once more, the quiet feels different again. Not heavier, but sharper, as though something unseen has taken shape between them. And as the meal begins, the mother's gaze lifts once, briefly, toward the father. Not questioning, not accusing, just resting there for a moment longer than usual. And the father notices his own movement slowing slightly before continuing. And nothing is said, nothing is asked. But the moment does not pass unnoticed. It lingers, subtle but clear. And as they continue to eat, the space between them feels more defined. No longer just silence, but something that holds meaning. Something that suggests a question forming, not yet spoken, not yet answered, but present. And for the first time, the quiet at the table does not simply exist. It watches. It waits. The next meal unfolds with the same careful movements, but something new has entered the room, a quiet attention that was not there before. And as they sit, each action seems slightly more deliberate. The placement of the bowls, the way the bread is broken, the pace of each bite. And though no one speaks, you can feel it, the subtle checking. Not obvious, not direct, just small glances that pass quickly, measuring without appearing to measure. And the father pauses once, his hand resting near his bowl for a moment longer than needed, while the mother lowers her gaze again, steady, composed, and the child sits still, sensing the shift without understanding it, and the meal continues, outwardly unchanged. Yet beneath it, something has begun to move, a quiet habit forming, where each person becomes aware not only of their own portion, but of everyone else's. Later, when the house quiets and the evening settles in, the father sits alone for a moment longer than usual, his hands resting together, unmoving. And though his face shows little, his stillness carries thought, the kind that does not resolve quickly. And after some time, he rises and moves toward the storage, opening it with care, not fully, just enough. And this time, his gaze lingers inside, longer than before, as if trying to fix the image in his mind, to remember exactly what remains. And when he closes it again, his movements are precise, controlled, as though nothing about this is uncertain anymore. And yet, when he turns away, there is a weight in the pause that follows, a quiet understanding that what he sees now may not remain the same for long. The following evening, the silence at the table deepens, not louder, not heavier, just more present, as if it has settled into place. And when the food is set down, the mother's hands move with the same care, but she pauses briefly before placing the final bowl, her eyes flicking once across the table, noticing without appearing to notice. And as they begin to eat, something shifts, not in what they do, but in how it feels. The distance between them more defined, the quiet more contained. And though no one speaks of it, the sense of watching, of being aware of each other's actions, has become part of the moment. Subtle,
constant. And even the child, who once sat without thought, now remains still. Their attention drawn not just to the food, but to the space around it, to the quiet movements that now carry more meaning than before.
Later, as the evening settles and the fire lowers to a steady glow, the mother moves quietly to the storage, her steps soft, her movements practiced. And this time, when she reaches for it, she does not leave it as it is. She adjusts it, shifting it slightly, not far, just enough. And when she opens it, her hands move with care, checking once more, then closing it again. And before stepping away, she secures it. A small motion, simple, almost ordinary, yet different, because it is no longer only about knowing what is there, but about keeping it in place. And when she returns to the room, nothing in her expression has changed, nothing that can be seen, and yet something has been decided, quietly, without words. A small boundary drawn, not spoken, but set. The father notices the change the next time he approaches, not immediately, not in a way that interrupts his movement, but in the slight pause of his hand as it reaches for the storage. Something feels different, the way it rests, the way it opens, and for a moment he remains still, his hand lingering there before continuing, and when he finally looks inside, his gaze holds a fraction longer than before. Not surprised, not questioning, just aware. And when he closes it again, his movements are just as careful, just as controlled. But there is a shift, subtle, quiet. The recognition that something has been altered, not in what remains, but in how it is being held. And though he says nothing, does nothing to change it, the moment does not pass unnoticed. It settles, becoming part of what he now carries. That night, as they sit together once more, the table feels more distant than before, not in space, but in feeling. And the meal begins as it always does, quiet, measured. But when the child reaches for their portion, their hand slows slightly, as if aware of something they cannot fully name. And they glance once, briefly, toward the others, then back down, continuing without hesitation. And the parents notice, each in their own way, not reacting, not speaking, but holding that moment quietly. And as they eat, the silence stretches between them, no longer shared in the same way, but divided into smaller, separate spaces, where each person remains within their own thoughts, their own awareness. And even though they still sit together, still move through the same routine, something has shifted further. The sense of being watched, and of watching in return, now resting gently but constantly in the room. The next day moves quietly, the same tasks, the same small routines, but something no longer stays hidden as easily as before. And when the father returns, his movements remain steady, unchanged on the surface. Yet there is a moment, brief, almost unnoticeable, when something does not align. A small detail, a gesture that comes too late or too carefully, and the mother sees it. Not clearly, not completely, but enough. Enough for her attention to pause. And though she says nothing, does nothing to stop what is happening, the awareness settles in, more defined now, less uncertain, and the space between them holds it gently, not breaking, not confronting, but no longer untouched. That evening, the quiet at the table feels different again, not just present, but carrying something within it. And as they begin to eat, the movements remain careful. But there is a moment when the rhythm breaks, slight, almost invisible, a pause that does not belong. And then it returns, just as quietly. But it is enough. Enough for the mother to lift her gaze, enough for the father to slow his hand. And for a brief second, their eyes meet. Not in anger,
not in accusation, but in recognition. A shared understanding that something has been seen, something cannot be undone. And then the moment passes. Their gazes fall away, and the meal continues. But not as it was before. Because now, what was hidden has begun to surface, even if no one chooses to speak it aloud.
When the meal ends, no one lingers at the table. No one remains longer than needed, and they move away quietly, each returning to their place, their task, their own space within the room. And though nothing has been said, nothing has been resolved. The distance between them feels clearer now, no longer subtle, no longer uncertain, but present in the way they move around each other. In the absence of small gestures that once existed without thought, and even the child senses it, not understanding why, only that something has changed in a way that does not return easily. And as the night settles, the house grows still once more. But this stillness is different, not shared, not whole, but divided, each person resting within their own quiet, their own thoughts, their own careful awareness of what remains and what no longer does.
The next day carries on with the same quiet rhythm, yet something has shifted beneath it. And when the father returns from outside, he does not go directly to the table. Not this time. He pauses near the doorway, his hand resting briefly against the frame. And then, without calling attention to it, he reaches into what he carries and takes a small piece for himself. Not quickly, not greedily, just a simple motion, as if it belongs there, as if it has always been part of the routine. And he eats it before stepping further inside, leaving nothing behind to be seen. And when he finally joins the others, everything appears unchanged, his expression calm, his movements steady. Yet something has already been decided, quietly, without words. A small shift where what is his begins, for the first time, to come before what is shared.
Later, when the room is still and the light softens along the walls, the mother moves again toward the storage, her steps slow, her hands familiar with the motion. And when she opens it, her gaze lingers inside longer than before, not searching, not questioning, just holding what she sees. And after a moment, her hand reaches in, not to measure this time, but to take a small portion, careful, precise. And when she withdraws, she does not pause, does not hesitate. She closes it as she always has and turns away, carrying what she has taken without drawing attention to it. And when she returns to her place, nothing about her appears different. And yet, something has changed. Something quiet but certain, where keeping something aside has become an action she no longer resists.
The child watches more than before now, not always directly, not in ways that are obvious, but in small moments, in glances that come and go. And as the next meal begins, they sit in their place, hands resting lightly, waiting. But their attention is no longer only on what is given to them. It moves, slowly, carefully, noticing how the others eat, how they pause, how they look away. And when their own portion is set down, they do not reach for it immediately, just for a moment, just long enough to feel that something is different. And then they begin, quietly, without question, without complaint. And as they eat, they hold that awareness inside, not understanding it fully, but learning from it, piece by piece. The quiet lesson that what is shared is no longer the same for everyone. That evening, the table is no longer the place it once was. And when the time for eating comes, they do not gather all at once, not in the same way. The father sits first, the others follow later, each arriving without waiting for the others to begin. And though the food is still placed in the center,
The act of sharing has shifted, each person staying closer to their own space, their own portion, and the rhythm that once held them together has loosened, becoming uneven. And no one speaks of it. No one tries to return things to how they were, because something in them has already accepted this change, quietly, without agreement. And as they eat, the silence is no longer shared. It is separate. Each person moving through the moment alone, even while sitting side by side.
As the meal continues, the father reaches for his portion with a steadier hand, his movements slightly quicker than before, not rushed, but more certain, as if hesitation no longer serves a purpose. And the mother mirrors this in her own way, her actions precise, controlled, taking what she needs without pause. And the child, watching, follows the same pattern, their movements becoming faster, more focused, each bite taken with less delay. And though no one speaks, no one acknowledges the shift, it is there, clear and steady, the quiet understanding that what is available must be taken before it is gone. And in this new rhythm, there is no room for waiting, no space for the slow, shared pacing that once defined their meals. When the bowls are nearly empty, no one leans back as they once did. No one sets their spoon aside before finishing completely. Each person continues until nothing remains in front of them, and even then their attention lingers, not on each other, but on the space where the food had been, as if something might still appear. And the mother no longer leaves anything behind. The father no longer slows his pace, and the child no longer hesitates. And though this change is not spoken, not agreed upon, it settles into them fully, becoming the new way they move through the meal, where nothing is left, nothing is spared, and the idea of saving something for later fades quietly, replaced by the need to take everything that is there while it is still there. The next meal comes with fewer words than before, and even the small sounds that once filled the space seem to fade. And though they still sit near each other, no one speaks of the food, no one mentions what remains or what is missing, because the subject itself has become something to avoid, something that sits too close to what they are already thinking. And as they eat, their focus stays on their own hands, their own bowls, and when a glance rises, it turns away quickly, as if naming the moment would make it heavier. And so the silence holds, not empty, but careful, protecting each of them from what they do not want to say. That evening, something breaks the pattern. Not loudly, not suddenly, but enough to be felt. A movement that comes too quickly, a hand reaching at the same time as another, and for a brief moment, their fingers meet. Not in connection, but in resistance. And neither pulls away at first, just a pause, a stillness where both remain. And then the moment shifts. One takes what is there, the other withdraws, and nothing is said. No apology, no explanation. But the air changes. The quiet no longer soft, no longer distant, but edged, holding something sharper beneath it. And as they continue to eat, the rhythm does not return to what it was, because something has crossed between them, something that does not easily fade. After that, the distance settles more clearly, no longer subtle, no longer uncertain. And when they move through the room, they do so without the small gestures that once connected them. No passing of food, no quiet offers, no shared pauses. Each action stays contained, belonging only to the one who makes it. And even the child no longer looks to the others for guidance, no longer waits, because the pattern has changed, and it has changed for all of them, quietly, completely. And though they still exist in the same space, still follow the same routine, the sense of togetherness has thinned to something almost unrecognizable, something that remains only in memory, not in the moment. That night, the house holds a different kind of quiet.
Not the gentle stillness that once settled after a shared meal, but something more distant, more contained. And as they move through the space, each step feels separate, each action belonging only to the one who makes it. The father sits alone for a while before resting. The mother turns away earlier than before, and the child lies still, facing the wall. And though they are all within the same room, something has ended without being spoken. The sense of being a single whole. And what remains now is only the structure of it, the shape of a family, without the feeling that once filled it.
Morning comes again, pale and quiet, and when the mother opens the storage, her hands pause almost immediately. Not searching, not measuring, just still. Because what remains is no longer uncertain, no longer something to estimate. It is clear now, limited, enough for only a short time. And she closes it slowly, her movements careful, controlled, as they have always been. But this time, the meaning does not stay inside her alone. It moves with her, carried into the room, into the space where the others will soon sit. And though she does not speak of it, does not call them to look, the weight of it begins to settle between them, quietly, steadily, unavoidable. When they gather again, the table feels smaller somehow, not in size, but in what it holds. And the food placed before them is clearly less, not hidden, not stretched enough to disguise it. And as they sit, no one begins right away. There is a pause, longer than before. And in that pause, something is understood without being said. A question forming in the space between them, not asked aloud, but present, clear in the way their eyes remain lowered, in the way their hands rest without moving. And though no one speaks the words, it is there, shared and unspoken. The quiet recognition that what remains is no longer enough for all of them in the same way. The pause does not last forever, and when it ends, it does so gently, almost without notice, as the mother reaches forward, her hands steady, and begins to divide what little remains. Not as she once did, not with the quiet confidence of balance, but with a slower care, a longer hesitation between each movement. And as she separates the portions, her eyes do not lift, not to the father, not to the child, because this is no longer a simple act of sharing. It has become something else, something that requires a decision, even if that decision is not spoken aloud. And when she finishes, the pieces rest on the table, uneven in a way that cannot be fully hidden, and she draws her hands back, still, waiting without appearing to wait. The father remains silent for a long moment, longer than any pause that has come before, his gaze resting on the table, on what has been divided, and his hands do not move, not immediately, as if he is holding something in place, something that cannot be undone once it begins. And the room stays quiet around him, the mother unmoving, the child watching without understanding. And when he finally shifts, it is slow, deliberate, not reaching yet, only adjusting, as though preparing himself for something that does not have a clear shape. And even then, no words come, no instruction, no refusal, only the weight of the moment settling deeper, filling the space where something once would have been said. The child hears the silence differently now, not as something calm, not as something familiar, but as something that carries meaning. And though they do not understand what is being decided, they feel that something is happening, something that includes them without being explained, and their eyes move between the two adults, waiting, not for food, but for something else, some sign, some word that will tell them what to do. But nothing comes, only stillness, only the quiet that stretches longer than it should. And in that quiet, the child begins to hold their own breath slightly,
as if even the smallest movement might disturb what is forming. And for the first time, the meal is no longer just about hunger. It is about something they cannot name, but cannot ignore.
The moment does not break with words. It shifts quietly, almost gently,
As the father finally reaches forward, his hand steady, his movement slow. And though nothing is said, the direction of his choice becomes clear in the way he adjusts what lies on the table. Not dramatically, not harshly, just enough to change the balance. And the mother watches without stopping him, her gaze lowered, her hands still, as if the decision has already passed beyond her. And the child remains silent, their eyes following the movement without fully understanding it. And when the father withdraws his hand, everything is set. Not evenly, not as it once was, but in a way that will not be changed again. And the quiet that follows is deeper than before, because now, something has been decided without being spoken. They begin to eat, slowly, more slowly than any meal before, as if each movement must pass through that decision before it can continue. And though they still sit together, the act of eating no longer belongs to all of them in the same way. The portions are different now, clearly, undeniably, and no one pretends otherwise. The mother lifts her food with steady hands, the father eats without looking up, and the child moves carefully, unsure of the pace, unsure of what is expected. And the room holds them all in a quiet that does not soften, does not ease, but remains, present in every bite, in every pause, in every small movement that follows what has already been said. As the meal continues, something else begins to take shape. Not in what is said, but in what is not done. And when the food in front of one of them remains untouched for a moment longer than it should, no one speaks, no one urges, no one offers. And slowly, it becomes clear that this portion, this share, will not be taken. Not now, and perhaps not at all. And the others notice, each in their own way, but no one reaches for it, no one claims it, because the meaning of that absence settles between them, quiet but heavy. And as the fire lowers and the room grows dim, the space at the table holds more than what was eaten. It holds what was left behind, and the choice that came with it. Morning arrives slowly, the light pale and quiet as it slips into the room, and for a moment, nothing seems different. The same walls, the same stillness, the same space they have always shared. But as they begin to move, as each of them rises and takes their place in the day, something has shifted in a way that cannot be undone. The table remains, but it no longer gathers them in the same way. The storage remains, but it no longer holds the same meaning. And when their eyes pass one another, even briefly, there is a pause. Not long, not obvious, just enough to feel that something has changed between them. Something that will not return to what it was. And though no one speaks of the night before, no one names what has happened, it stays with them, carried quietly in the way they move, in the way they do not move, in the way the house itself feels slightly unfamiliar, as if it now belongs to a different version of the people within it. The day continues, as days always do, steady, quiet, without asking for meaning. And yet, something remains beneath it, a question that does not need words to exist. And as you watch them move through the space, each in their own way, you begin to see not only what they have done, but what they have become. Not suddenly, not all at once, but through each small step, each quiet choice, each moment where something shifted just enough to change the next. And there is no clear line where it began, no single point where it could have been stopped, only a path, slow and steady, that led them here. And now, as the light settles and the room grows still once more, The question remains, not spoken, not answered, but present, resting gently in the silence. When hunger takes everything else away, what is left of who you are?